People who speak multiple languages, have you ever had funny situations where someone didn't expect that you understand their language?
I'm American, but I speak a bit of Russian. A few years ago, I was in St. Petersburg and decided to buy tickets for a boat to Peterhof. All the signs at the kiosk were in Russian, so I easily learned all the prices. But it was obvious I wasn't local, so the clever seller tried to charge me 3 times more. In response to that bold move, I looked her straight in the eye and said in perfect Russian, "But it clearly says on the sign that one ticket costs X." You should have seen her reaction. Her jaw almost dropped. Her colleague sitting next to her burst out laughing.
As far as I know, that's a pretty common story in Russia. One price for locals, another for tourists. I was walking around to Italy with a German friend and told him in German, "Bro, maybe don't talk shit about people like that. Someone around might understand us." A woman walking nearby goes, "Yeah, like me."
Support us by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Just a few clicks for you, but a huge motivation for us to grow. Got questions? Drop them below. We read everything and always reply. The best ones might even show up in our next video.
There was this Chinese takeout place near our college campus where everyone spoke Mandarin. I know Chinese too, but I always ordered in English because I was kind of self-conscious about my accent. Usually I'd get rice with meat, but that day I already had rice at home, so I went in just to get the meat. I placed my order without rice, paid, and then I hear the cashier yelling in Chinese to the kitchen, "This fat ass just wants meat, no rice." I heard that very clearly and responded in Mandarin, "That's right, I've got plenty of rice at home." Ever since then, they always give me extra, and fun fact, they didn't charge me a dime for that order.
Me and my friend were trying to get home after a night of drinking, but the place was far and we didn't have much money. So we found 2 other girls who were heading in the same direction and suggested splitting a taxi. They agreed, we got in and started driving. Then the girls start chatting in Swedish, not realizing my friend is half Finnish, half Swedish. I also understand Swedish a bit, but honestly, I was too drunk to care. Suddenly, my friend gets a text from me that says, "They're not planning to pay for the ride." I go, "Maybe we should tell the driver?" My friend turns to the driver and says, "Don't let those 2 out until they pay their half." He got the hint, locked the doors, and yeah, they ended up paying.
I lived in South Korea for 3 years but barely learned any Korean. During that time, I became friends with an English-speaking Korean girl who everyone assumed wasn't local. She was really tall and had a strong American accent from studying in the US and New Zealand. When she enrolled in an international university in Korea, the professors assumed she didn't speak Korean. Because of that, they'd often insult her right in front of her face. She felt awful but kept her cool and stayed silent for a whole year. Then came graduation. She walked on stage in front of 800 people and gave a speech in flawless Korean, casually reminding her professors about the time they called her a foreign pig. Apparently, one of the teachers burst into tears right then and there out of shame. Wish I could have seen that.
When I was 16 and started working at McDonald's, I ended up on a Spanish-speaking team. No one there knew I actually spoke Spanish pretty well, too. Sometimes they'd say some really rude stuff about me in Spanish, thinking I didn't understand. But I just pretended I didn't get it. That went on for a few weeks until one day a manager came up to me and said, "They value that guy more than you because he speaks 2 languages." So I instantly replied, in Spanish, "Cool, but I speak 3. The guy's jaw dropped when he realized I'd understood everything all along. I'm half Peruvian, half Swiss, but I live in Peru. You'd never guess I had anything Swiss in me just by looking. One time I was on a bus and overheard 2 Swiss girls behind me chatting about how attractive Latin guys are. Then one of them asked the other if she thinks I'm cute. Without waiting for the answer, I suddenly turn around and say, "Yeah, I'm curious too." It was hilarious. The look on their faces was priceless, a mix of shame, confusion, everything. But hey, now I've got 2 new friends. Edit, they were speaking Swiss German, Schweizerdeutsch. Edit 2, later they admitted they both found me attractive. I'm an American expat living in Thailand. I've got a big beard which gets me a lot of attention. Locals, not realizing I understand them, sometimes yell stuff like, "Look, a monkey, monkey," or "Want a banana?" or just some other nasty comment. Normally I ignore it because I don't want to deal with people, but there was one time I just snapped. 2 teen girls, maybe 14, kept following me, making nonstop monkey jokes, running around, yelling, being annoying. I stopped, looked right at them, and in perfect Thai said, "There are no blue-eyed monkeys. They have black eyes, like yours." They were absolutely speechless on the spot. While I was in Germany, a friend of mine who teaches English at a secondary school invited me to visit one of her classes. She introduced me to the students. I said hi, told them I was from the US and happy to be there. Then she says, "Guys, feel free to ask him questions in English. What do you think Americans are like?" Some kid in the front row tried to be funny and mumbled in German, "Fat and stupid." He thought he said it quietly, but the whole class heard it loud and clear. The teacher turns red. The students are cracking up. I didn't know what to do, so I quickly switched to German and said, "You're right. And by the way, a lot of Americans speak German too. The kid just about crapped himself. In that moment, he looked like a baby deer that accidentally wandered onto the stage during a Beyoncé concert. He seriously thought there was no way an American could understand German.
One time my friends and I went shopping at the mall. While I was in the fitting room, two store employees were standing nearby totally trash-talking me in Spanish. They were annoyed I was taking too long, called me a dumb gringo, and kept mocking me, all while asking in English if I needed any help. What they didn't know is, I'm of Spanish descent, so I walked out of the fitting room and in perfect Spanish said, "Nope, I don't need any help." They looked like they were about to melt from embarrassment.
I was flying on vacation with my aunt. We're sitting at the airport, chatting in Finnish while waiting for our flight. My aunt had a broken leg, so she was in a wheelchair the whole time. Even though we're both Finnish, my aunt has been living in Germany for several years and speaks perfect German. I've also lived there a bit, though my German is weaker. Anyway, boarding time comes. The flight attendant sees my aunt in the wheelchair and offers to let us board first. Standing nearby was a clearly annoyed German couple, and I hear the husband say to his wife, "Honestly, I think disabled people shouldn't even be allowed to fly."
My badass aunt asked me to slow down. I was pushing her wheelchair, turns to the guy and replies in perfect German, "Excuse me, sir, but no broken leg is going to ruin my vacation. And what you said is extremely offensive to people with disabilities. I genuinely feel sorry for your wife. Have a pleasant flight." The men didn't say a word, just turned bright red and looked away. His wife was in total shock.
Even though I'm Spanish, you wouldn't guess it by looking at me. I've got fair skin, blonde hair, and green eyes. When I lived in London, I got into funny situations more than once. My favorite one is when I was riding the tube home from work. That day, there was a big football match, Chelsea versus Barcelona, and I ended up on the train with some fans heading to the game. At one point, the train suddenly stopped, and I lost my balance and bumped into one of them. Not knowing they were Spanish, I apologized to the guy in English.
So the train keeps moving. For a solid 5 minutes, the guy's mocking the whole situation in Spanish, saying things like, "Would have been better if this fat had just face planted on the floor." Eventually, we get to their stop. They get off, still making jokes about me, and as they're walking away, I shout in perfect Spanish, "Great game, you shit-eating losers." They were stunned.
This is a story about my stepmom. She grew up in Japan, speaks fluent Japanese, but looks like a white Italian woman. She's only a quarter Japanese and doesn't resemble the typical East Asian appearance at all. One day, she decided to treat her friends to a little girls' day out and took them to a salon for manicures and pedicures. The women working there were chatting away in Japanese, mostly about men, gossiping, and doing their thing. But when it was my stepmom's turn for a pedicure, they suddenly focused on her. See, she's not exactly petite, and her feet aren't exactly model-like either. The salon workers caught on to that and started mocking her, in Japanese of course, giggling and enjoying the fact that someone else got the short end of the beauty stick compared to them.
My stepmom said at first she didn't want to react at all, but after 5 minutes of non-stop trash talk, her patience finally ran out, and she answered them in their own language. "You know, I didn't realize this place only served princesses." Maybe not word for word, but that was the idea. The smiles on their faces instantly turned into overwhelming guilt. They apologized in English and didn't say another word until the end of the appointment. I had a funny moment in Japan once. I'm walking down the street and hear, "Ooh, look at that hottie, and he's got blue eyes too." My ego skyrockets. I turn my head to see my admirers, and it's a group of tiny 13-year-old schoolgirls who looked even younger, typical youthful Asian features. Yeah, suddenly it wasn't such a great compliment anymore.
I lived in Korea for a while. I came in for a haircut, the assistant seated me, got things ready, and I overheard her telling the hairdresser, "Whoa, he looks like a baby." I was 22 at the time, but yeah, I did look really young. So I turned to her and asked, "Who? Me? I look like a baby?" She turned beet red and ran off in embarrassment. The hairdresser realized that I understood Korean, and from then on we switched to speaking it.
I'm Brazilian, but I've spoken English from a young age, so I can totally pass as American, as long as I don't talk too much. Once I had to fly from Atlanta to Rio. At the airport, I met two really beautiful girls who spoke perfect English and were flying with their mom. Later, I found out they were American too, but of Brazilian descent, and they also thought I was just another American. We chatted a bit, exchanged some pleasantries, and it turned out one of them had a seat right next to mine. So we board the plane, I'm putting my bag in the overhead bin, and I overhear their mom saying to them in Portuguese, "Poor guy, he really thinks I'm gonna let one of you sit next to him the whole flight."
So I turned to her and reply, also in Portuguese, "Don't worry, ma'am, I have a girlfriend, so I'd be more than happy to share this flight with y'all." She goes, "Oh," and then she sat in silence for the entire flight. Ha!
I don't really speak Spanish, but I understand everything just fine. I used to work with used cars in Houston, and as you can guess, ran into a lot of Spanish-speaking folks. They never asked if I spoke Spanish because I looked like a typical white guy who only knows English. It was always fun watching couples come up to me and start discussing, right in front of me, how they were going to haggle the price down. I always knew their sneaky tactics and how much they were actually willing to pay. I'd often overhear stuff like, "I'll try to knock off $1,000, but if he agrees to take $500 off, we're buying it anyway."
After we'd settle on a price, I'd wait for the perfect moment to jump in and let them know I'd understood everything they'd been saying. Every time, without fail, their faces would go blank with shock. You could just read on their faces, "You sneaky bastard." Now, those moments, absolutely priceless.
Support us by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Just a few clicks for you, but a huge motivation for us to grow. Got questions? Drop them below. We read everything and always reply. The best ones might even show up in our next video.